Hello everyone, and welcome. I know I just did a video of Nespresso last week, but there was one more capsule that sounded really interesting, and I've decided to take a closer look at it today. That is the aged Sumatran coffee, and it's a 2016 vintage, meaning it was aged for about 3 years before it was roasted and packaged. So we will dive in a little bit to understand what aging coffee looks like, and there's also an interesting processing method with this coffee that we will look at as well. For most people, this is a concept that can be applied to cheese, or wine, or whiskey, and they don't often think of it as a concept for coffee. It's actually not that uncommon though, and apparently it can create some tasty results. I was a little skeptical myself, but it seems that if you use the right coffee, store it in the right environment, and take care of it properly, you can enhance the flavor. From looking into the topic, it seems that coffees with low acidity work best for this, and they have to be stored at relatively low temperatures, preferably at higher elevations where the temperature is more stable. Doing this is said to enhance the body of the coffee and potentially ramp up some of the natural sugars, creating a sweeter flavor. But as you can imagine, there is a flip side to this aging aspect, which is what happens when you don't choose the right coffee and don't store it properly. There have been many cases of coffee being labeled as aged, when in reality they sat in very hot and humid climates with little to no care. With these cases, there is a certain aged quality to it, but not in a pleasant way. We are more likely to taste some fermented and earthy notes and just some really dull and flat coffee. So the question is, what category is this Nespresso pod in? Well, when we look at the website, there isn't a lot of information, but we can tell that the coffee comes from the Aceh province on the island of Sumatra, high up in the Gayo Mountains. National Geographic actually wrote an interesting article on the relationship between Nespresso and the farmers. And it looks like they are getting their coffee from a fair trade cooperative with about 1,800 farmers. I'll link the article in the description if you want a full read. They do appear to be producing quality coffee, and if we assume that the storage was done at a high elevation in this region, then this coffee may be a great contender for the aging process. But now I want to talk about their unique processing method used by Indonesian farmers, and that is called Giling Basah, or wet hulled. To understand this better, we should start with the basics of coffee processing. First, cherries are picked from the coffee plant. Then, in a common method called the washed process, the cherries are depulped, removing the outer skin from the inner bean. The beans are washed and soaked in a tank for some time to remove the remaining mucilage. That is, some of the stuff still left over and stuck to the bean from the fruit. Then the beans are laid out to dry and their moisture content is brought down to about 12%. At this point, some beans will go through an optional process called hulling the coffee. This is where the parchment paper, a final layer surrounding the dried bean, can be removed. So with the wet hulled coffee from Indonesia and the coffee we have here today, how does it differ from what I just described? Well, it all comes down to when the hulling process happens. Instead of drying the coffee down to 12%, the coffee is hulled at a much higher moisture level of around 30%. This means that the parchment is removed when the beans are still quite soft, and the parchment is more stuck to their surface. Removing parchment like this is generally not great for coffee. It is more likely to damage and squish the beans by putting it through heavy machinery when it's still soft and malleable. It also exposes the bean more fully to the sun when they do dry the coffee later on, as there is no parchment layer, and this can cause the beans to dry too quickly, which is also not great for flavor. This processing method seems to have started as a way to get beans to the port and for sale as quickly as possible. However, as I'm about to taste this coffee, I want to be careful not to say that a certain processing method must be good or bad. There are many that would argue that this style of processing creates a unique flavor profile unlike anything else in the world. And in that sense, it is unique and special, and it's something that the farmers are proud of and that lots of people around the world enjoy drinking. So I guess the only thing left to do is to try it out. Based on what we've learned so far, we are hoping for a well-aged and cared for coffee with low acidity, a big body, and a unique flavor profile due to the processing method, with the most prominent note I've heard being cured tobacco. Even though it is 5 p.m. here and I'm trying some coffee, I always love the smell of a strong, bold coffee, and this is definitely that. And there's something very, very spicy about it. Lots of wood, cinnamon, a little bit of smoke, some nutmeg. There's a complexity to the nose that I'm really enjoying. There's some high notes up there as well as some low notes, and it kind of comes in waves. Before I give this a taste, and while we let it cool down a little bit, we'll see that Nespresso says they separate the single origin coffee into 2 batches for a split roast. The first split is roasted intensively but for a short time, reaching a medium dark color. The second split is roasted longer to add intensity and a velvety body to the final cup. So it sounds like they're sort of mixing a medium and a dark roast together. And that medium roast would allow a little bit more of whatever acidity is left in this coffee to come through. I get a sort of deep, dark tobacco note that comes out up front, but it sort of slides away and I get a little bit of that spicy nutmeg like a gingerbread man. And that is really interesting, and it comes out in the middle, and when I swallow, I do get some astringency and bitterness, and that is coming from the darker roast that they do. They also describe it here as spicy, woody, and cocoa character, and it's a woody and smooth aromatic profile. Yeah, I would definitely agree with those descriptors so far. I think they align with what I'm tasting. Okay, so I just have a little bit left and I added a touch of milk just to see what other flavors come through. So I'll try it with a bit of milk and see what changes. Yeah, it's definitely more interesting on its own as an espresso. I mean, by all means, grab one if you can, try it out, throw some milk in it and see how it goes. It's just a little more dull and kind of just a big, strong coffee in milk. And you lose some of the complexity, some of the flavors that I really enjoyed, some of that spiciness. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with the purchase. I definitely recommend it, that you go and check it out. I'm not sure at the time of posting this video whether it's available or not. You'll just have to go and look it up for your country. Now, if you were to ask me if I could tell whether this coffee was well aged and cared for, I probably couldn't tell you, to be honest. I haven't tried many aged coffees, but I would definitely do it again if I had the chance. I hope this video was helpful and informative, and please subscribe if you haven't already, as I do release weekly content. Have yourselves a great week of brewing coffee, and I'll see you again next week. Have a great day.